Hi everyone, welcome to our review video for the midterm exam. I'm going to begin here on page 1 just by going through the different problems and trying to review and explain to you how each of these problems works. So we'll begin with number 1, where it tells us to do a few things up here in the directions. It wants us to use the given frequency distribution to find the class width, the class midpoints of just the first class, and then the class boundaries of the first class. So starting with the class width, and this is an easy thing to make a mistake on, remember that to measure the class width, it's not from the beginning to the end of any of these classes, but from the beginning to the beginning to the beginning. So when I want to calculate this width, I'm just going to take the start of one class, like here at 53, and I'm going to subtract the start of the previous class, which in this case would be 50. So notice our class width is 3. Now, the next thing they ask us to do is to calculate the class midpoint for just the first class. So the midpoint for this first class, you could think of that as the average. So for this midpoint value, I'm just going to add these two the values together, the 50 and the 52. So 50 plus 52, and then of course I divide that by 2 to find the average or the mean. So in this case, that midpoint comes out to be 51. And then finally here for the class boundaries, the class boundaries is basically just taking these class limits and it closes the gap. So notice how this class ends at 52, the next one begins at 53. I would close that gap just by increasing by 0.5 and decreasing by 0.5. So when you look at that, for just the first class, the lower limit needs to come down by a half, so that would be 49.5. And then the upper limit would need to go up by a half, so that would be 52.5. And now that I've got all of that written out, I just look for the correct option. Looks like option D is the one that, there's my width of 3, my midpoint of 51, and my boundaries of 49.5 to 52.5. So option D is going to be our correct final answer. I'm going to go ahead here and move over to problem number 2. And in this one, it says a city in the Pacific Northwest recorded its highest temperature at 75 degrees Fahrenheit and its lowest temperature at 30 degrees Fahrenheit for a particular year. Use this information to find the upper and lower class limits of the first class if you wish to construct a frequency distribution with 10 classes. So the very first thing we need to do here is calculate the range. The range is just the difference or the span from the minimum to maximum entries. Now they tell us here that the highest temperature is 75 degrees and the lowest temperature is at 30 degrees. Of course, when I subtract those, notice I get a range of 45. The next thing we need to do is calculate the class width. To do that, I'm going to jot down a little note here to calculate the width. I just take that range, that 45. I want to divide it by the number of classes, which in this problem is 10, and that comes out to be 4.5. Now, one thing that is key here is whenever you do that division, no matter what you get for the result, you're always going to round up to the next available whole number, which in this case makes 5. Even if that had been a 4.1 or a 4.2, I would still be rounding up to the next whole number, which is 5. And then you can think about how you would actually start writing out these classes. You would start with the minimum entry, which is 30. I would add the class width, which is 5. That would be the start of the next class. I would add it again. That would be the start of the next class, and so on. Now, if you look, if the second class is starting at 35, that means the first class must have ended at 34. This one would end at 39. This one would end at 44. And of course, I'm just going to put etc. here. We don't have to write all of those out. We really only have to look at the first class. So in this case, it's 30 to 34, which is option B. All right, let's go ahead and look at the last problem on page 1. This is a nice simple question down at the bottom for number 3. It says, for the stem and leaf plot below, what is the maximum and minimum entry? This is really just a reminder about how stem and leaf plots are structured. Notice the key here says that 11 on the left, 8 on the right translates to an 11.8. So my minimum entry here, the smallest, is up here at the top, 11.6. So that's 11.6 for the minimum. And of course on the maximum, I go all the way down here. That's 17 and 8. So 17.8, that's our maximum. And then we just need to match that up with the correct option. That looks like option C is what I want to select for my final answer. All right, so now that page 1 is done, hopefully we're getting into the flow of things here. We're going to move over to page 2, and we'll continue our discussion on these review problems. So I'm at the top of page 2, looking at problem number 4. They tell us here that the scores of the top 10 finishers in a recent golf tournament are listed below. We want to just find the mean score or the average score. Now, there's a couple of ways you could do this. My recommendation for this particular problem, I'm actually just going to add these up. There's only 10 entries listed here, so I actually think I can do this a little bit quicker just by adding them up and dividing by 10. So that's exactly what I'm going to do here. You would also have the option to put all of this into your calculator using your stat edit option. And then you could do one variable stats. I'm just not going to bother with that because the only thing they're asking me to do here is find the average, which is a very quick and simple calculation. So when I add that together, I get a sum of 710. So if my sum is equal to 710, then the mean, I just take that 710 divided by the number of entries, which is 10, and that gives me a mean of 71. So this is option C. And like I said, for me, I don't even think it was worth it to put it into the calculator in my, in my list, because all they asked me to do was find the mean. Now, on number 5, it tells me that the top 14 speeds in miles per hour for pro stock drag racing over the past 2 decades are listed below. Here they just want us to find the mode speed. The mode, I'll remind everyone, that's just the most frequently occurring entry. Which of these entries appears most often? And really, when I'm looking at this, there's none that really strike me as appearing all that much, but there are a couple that I'm seeing pop up multiple times. Like here, the 201.4, I see that occurring twice. And then the 201.2. Now, since both of those appear twice, and there's nothing else that appears twice, and nothing else that appears more than twice, this distribution would be bimodal. You have 2 entries that are basically tying for the most frequently occurring. So in this case, I'm going to go with option A. That's bimodal because I have 2 values, right? The 201.2 and the 201.4. Those both tie for most frequently occurring. Those both appear twice. All right, on to problem 6. I'm going to scroll up, make sure that everything is in frame here. It says that grade points are assigned as follows. A grade of A is worth 4 points, B is worth 3 points, C is 2, D is 1, F is 0. Now, grades are weighted according to credit hours. So if a student receives an A in a 4-unit class, a D in a 2-unit class, a B in a 3-unit class, and a C in a 3-unit class, what is the student's grade point average? So what I would recommend for this one, I'm going to lay out the information in a little chart. Over here in my first column, I'm going to record the grade along with its value. So like if it's an A, I'll put an A and then 4 points next to it. And then in my next column, I need to write out its weight. So that's the weight that that value carries in our overall average. So notice it says if a student receives an A in a 4-unit class, So if our grade is A, the value of an A is 4 points, and it's a 4-unit class, so the weight is 4 units. Next, we receive a D in a 2-unit class. So a D has a value of 1 point, and it's a 2-unit class. So it's 2 credits or 2 hours, right? So that's the weight that's attached to it. We get a B in our next class. That's worth 3 points, and that's in a 3-unit class. So its weight is 3 units. And then finally here we get a C in a 3-unit class. So if I get a C, that's 2 grade points, and its weight is 3 units. So now, and I just kind of like to outline it like that. It makes it a little bit easier for me to keep organized with the information. Now that I've got these values entered, I'm going to go ahead and enter these into my calculator, L1 and L2. So let me go ahead and do that here. Remember to enter data. You're just going to go into your stat menu, and you want to edit. Now I've got some old data in here that I'm going to clear, enter, and likewise on L1 I want to clear, enter on that one. And in L1 I'm just going to put my grade points. So I had a grade point of 4, 1, 3, and 2. And then in my column 2, these are my weights. That's 4, 2, 3, and 3. And now once I've got all of that data entered, I'll just go to stat. I want to now calculate 1 variable stats for L1 and L2. TI-83 folks, remember you just type in 1 variable stats L1 comma L2. Now I'm ready to calculate, and I see that that X bar value is 2.75. So 2.75, that looks like option C for our final answer. Go ahead and record that here. All right, so let's move down to problem number 7, where they ask us to calculate the sample standard deviation. So one thing that's important here to notice, when you do your standard deviation, I'm going to do this in the calculator, it's always going to give you 2 standard deviations. It's going to give you a population standard deviation, sigma, and it's going to give you a sample standard deviation, S. So I'm going to go ahead and look at this in L1. So let me clear out that data I just used for the previous problem. I'm going to go to Stat, Edit, and I'm going to clear out that old data now. And I'm going to go ahead and type in this new data set. So in this case, my entries are 2, 6, I've got a 15 and a 9, 11 and 22, 1, 4, 8, and 19. Now that I've got all of that data entered, I'll just go to Stat, calculate 1 variable stats. Now in this case, I only want to use L1. I do not have a frequency list, so I'm going to go down here and hit my delete button, and then I'm ready to calculate. Again, TI-83 folks, you wouldn't have to do anything other than hit the 1 variable stats. It would use L1 as the default. When I calculate here, again, what's important to notice, there's a sigma value, right? That's the population standard deviation. I want the S value, that's the sample standard deviation, is 7.0875, etc. And when I look at all of my options here, it looks like they're rounding everything to 1 decimal place. So in this case, it's important to see, okay, 7.1 if I format it the way my options are given. So 7.1, option D, that would be my final answer. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at problem 8. Now on problem number 8, what they're asking us to do here, I'm going to move this up just a little bit, is they tell us the test scores of 30 students are listed below. They want us to find the 5-number summary. Now the 5-number summary, what that includes is your min and max, along with your 3 quartiles, Q1, Q2, and Q3. Now, option 1, you could enter all of this data into your calculator and then just do 1 variable stats, and it would automatically give you all of that information. Like I could show you real quick. I've still got the data in here from problem number 7. If I calculate 1 variable stats for all that data up here, if I scroll down, it gives me the 5-number summary, minimum, maximum, and my 3 quartiles. Now, so that's one way you could do this. You could actually enter all of that data and just do that, one variable stats and get it that way. I'm not going to do that because I'm noticing that this data is given in numerical order. And if it's given in numerical order, I actually think I can do it faster by hand rather than typing all 30 of these numbers into my calculator. So I'm going to start by identifying with the easy part, right? Here's the minimum and the maximum. And then the other thing, I'm going to cut this entire list right down the middle, which you can see how this is laid out. It's 10 entries per row, so right in the middle is between the 70 and the 74. So notice that median, let me spell that correctly, my goodness. So that median is just the average of 70 and 74. Right in the middle of 70 and 74 would be 72. And that median, by the way, that's the same thing as Q2. So that's 72 here. For the other quartiles, you now just need to cut each half in half. So if you look at the location of the median, I know there's 15 entries below that and 15 entries above. So let's focus on the 15 entries below this median. I now want the middle of that list. And the middle of 15 numbers would be the 8th entry, because then you would have 7 below and 7 above. So I'm just going to count out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. This 8th entry is Q1, the first quartile. Now let's reposition at the median. For the top 15 entries, I want the middle of that list, which again would be the 8th entry. So here I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Puts me right here for Q3. And so now I can see I've got the minimum and maximum. I've got my 3 quartiles identified. And I can tell by looking at all of the options here, it's got to be option C for my correct final answer. Then we'll go ahead and move on to problem 9.